Today we're going to be sewing scrub caps. So if you're like me, you've sewn a million masks and you're ready to do something more fun. There were a lot of patterns available for scrub caps, and the one I used was actually rad pattern scrub. It had 3 different versions, so I made the bouffant style with the optional elastic in the back. It also came as just a regular scrub cap for men, and then one with an extra little tail here for longer hair. I have a lot of hair, and I like the bouffant style. I think it contains everything better. So the first thing I did was cut out my pattern. Usually for a large pattern, I like to tape it all together and then I trace it. But for something small like this, I actually cut out the pieces and then taped it afterwards. So this is the bouffant style pattern, and then here are the ties. So a couple of things that are really important. Here's the fold, which means you're gonna fold your fabric and then cut so you make one big circle. And then the notch here. So a lot of people, I don't think, actually cut the notch out. I do. So when I actually cut out the pattern, I snip there, and that actually keeps your snip in the seam allowance, which makes it easier later. So same thing here, this has a little snip, and this is so that you can line up your pieces subsequently. What I also like to do is when I cut on the fold, I like to make a little snip right at the fold so that I know where the center of my pattern piece is. That also helps me line it up later. One of my most disgusting stories from the operating room was when I was an intern. I was at one of the busier services on the south side of town. So here you can see I've cut out this pattern piece here, and all I do with my pattern actually overlying, I make a little snip right here, right through the pattern, and you can see that there. And then same thing, right at the center where I folded it, I make a little snip there so I can use that later. That really helps me identify those areas. And that day we were removing a sebaceous cyst from someone's neck. Your next step is to make your gathers. So if you've never made gathers before, what you want to do is you want to use the longest setting, the longest stitch on your sewing machine, and you're going to start your gathers in between your marks, your little snips here. You want to leave long tails so that you can gather easily. And it was pretty big, I would say maybe the size of a lime. So, you know, pretty big. You're going to grab your little tail, and then you're just going to pull like that, and that's going to make your gathers. So the important thing when you do this is you want to make sure your gathers are even. So here you can see I attached my 2 pattern pieces. I lined up my notches. So I like to pin at each notch and then in the center. And then I pull my gathers and then try to evenly space them out. And then I just put lots of little clips in there to hold it in place. The important thing also is that when you pin this together, you're going to make sure that the right sides are facing each other. Right? So I'm using a solid and a print, so the solid doesn't really matter, but the print really does matter. The other thing you want to pay attention to is that when you cut out your pattern, make sure it's right side up, because this is how it's going to lay on your head. You'll see on my finished piece, I actually didn't pay attention to that. So the finished piece, it's upside down. And I got to take, the lead on this because it's a relatively simple procedure. So, of course I'm making my little ellipse, and I've got my little flap of skin, and it's dissected beautifully. And it's, again, it's sort of the size of a lime. So imagine the biggest, sort of juiciest, maybe cherry tomato you can imagine. So once you've pinned everything, you're just gonna go along and make your seam. It's a 1/4 inch seam all the way around. I like to sew with my gathers on top so I can keep an eye on trying to keep them mostly even. It's ultimately not going to matter that much. It's going to look nice however you end up doing it. And here it is. I have it on a hemostat. I'm handing it off to the scrub nurse, and she goes to put it down on the mayo. Once you finish both sides of your scrub cap, because it is fully reversible, you're going to want to place them together right sides facing, and you're going to line up all of the edges. So you can see here I used lots of pins all the way around. I found that it was easier to start at the tip of my ties and then sort of work my way around, making sure that all the major landmarks lined up appropriately. So lots and lots of clips. And when she does that, she apparently applied way too much force onto it, and she popped it. Your next step after that is to make your seam. Again, it's going to be a 1/4 inch seam all the way around. The most important part here is to leave a little opening right on one of these ties, like so that you can turn it right side out. If you sew all the way around, you're not going to be able to turn it. So what I find is easiest is I'll sort of work my fingers in here all the way to the end of the other tie, and then I'll sort of poke my finger through and then start pulling there. And there you go. It's like a magic trick. So a nice trick here is to use a chopstick right at the corner so you can really push it out. Oh, what I forgot to mention, before you turn it, you want to clip your corners. Because if they're really bulky, you're not going to get nice points. So I really should have done that first. Now, she's standing right next to me. So where does all that nastiness go? Right on my face. Now, once you've turned it inside out, you really want to take some time and straighten out all your seams. Again, it's good to use a chopstick here and kind of just push out all those seams. And then again, I used lots and lots of clips to make sure that it stayed nice and straight. The most important part here is the little opening where you turned it. So you want to make sure that you get that lined up nicely so that when you top stitch, it makes a nice closure. My senior, being sadistic, decided that I needed to finish the procedure before I can clean up. So she made me close skin, and it was a deep pocket, so I had to do multiple layers before I can go and wash off my face. And she was just laughing the whole time. There was one option that I did take, as I mentioned before. There's an option to add elastic to the back of the hat. I found this to be actually the trickiest part because I had to use real pins. And if you've ever stuck a pin under your nail, you know that's not fun. So what I did here, before you turn it, right at the end of your cap, the part that's the back of the head, you cut a little 4-inch piece of elastic. And what I did is I pinned both ends right here, using actual pins, and then I sort of folded it in half and pinned it to the middle of my hat, and then again folded it in half and pinned. So I had about 5 pins going here. And then as you sew, you want to use a zigzag stitch, which is meant to be a stretch stitch, so that when it stretches, it doesn't snap. So what you want to do as you're sewing is you're going to go ahead and stretch the elastic to fit the width of your fabric, and that's what's going to give you those gathers once the elastic is released. As you can see here, I'd like to say that I got her back for that, but I didn't. I really didn't have an opportunity to squirt nasty, sebaceous juice all over her face as I would have liked. On my finished hat, this is what it looks like after I turned it. I did consider top stitching it to give it a better finish, but I thought that was going to be really finicky and difficult, and I decided I kind of liked how it looked and no one was going to be inspecting it anyway, so it was good enough. As you can see here, I like to use a contrast color for my stitching because I think it just makes it more fun. I think it looks kind of cute. I don't know. What do you think? Phyllis, if you're out there, thank you for the memories. So we're not actually allowed to wear these in our operating room. That's a correction, we are allowed to wear them, but we still have to cover them with disposable bouffants, and so I've never thought it was worth the trouble. But now that I know how to make them, and I have lots of friends that would wear them, I decided it would be fun. And it's a good use of my fabric stash, because masks are boring, and these are more fun.